Hey everybody, today we're going to talk about conclusions. That's the part of an essay where you leave your audience something deeply to think about. Let's get started. You guys make concluding statements all the time. Like, for example, when you write a CSAT, where's that concluding sentence? That's right, the T concludes the paragraph by explaining what the evidence shows. But what's the purpose of a concluding paragraph in an essay? And why do you even need one at all? Remember this introduction? We took a look at it in the beginning of the school year, and it was this idea that if we arm teachers, we can ward off violence. Pause the screencast here to reread it. Well, let's say that student was asked to write a conclusion to wrap that essay up. Check out this awful one. Teachers at WPH should not be armed to prevent potential disaster from striking, opting for more nonviolent approaches instead. I think it's plain crazy to think of Dr. Erskine walking around with a semi-automatic weapon. If he's having an off day, there's no telling what could happen. What do you think? Pause the screencast to answer the question. When you're writing conclusions, you always have to determine what's your purpose for writing this, who's your audience, what's the form of the piece, and what's your role. The type of conclusion that you will write will depend on all four of those questions. And for most essays, the audience is always going to be formal, unless your teacher tells you otherwise. And that's going to be the case for humanities classes or outside of our class. When we think of conclusions, think of them as the big so what. How can you get your audience to care more deeply about your topic? In general, here's what conclusions may do. They should somehow link back in some way to the introduction. We call that echoing the introduction and coming full circle. Conclusions also consider what's surprising, what stands out, or what you want the audience to remember about your topic. They always leave the reader something to think deeply about, and oftentimes in argumentation, they call for action. They might predict future possibilities and discuss the impact and the legacy of the topic. In other words, how the world should remember it, or how the reader should remember the topic. Pause here to answer the question. But here's what conclusions should always avoid. You should never restate the thesis. If you have to restate the thesis, that means you probably haven't done a good idea explaining what your paper is about in general. You should never summarize what you just wrote. You may do that in a larger paper of maybe 5 pages or more where the reader might be forgetful of what you said, but in a short paper of a page or two, there's no need to do that. Never write the words "in conclusion." If it's the last paragraph of an essay, the reader is pretty sure you're concluding. And finally, never use yourself in any of the word choices. I think, I believe, I can't believe, I would. It's not about you ever in the essay. It's about the topic. Don't do that, or you're going to make your reader kind of mad. Pause here to answer the question. So if the essay that you're going to argue is that teachers should be armed, and you are writing as yourself in a newspaper article to persuade William Penn High School students that this idea is a good one, and this was the intro, answer these questions to figure out how to conclude. What can you echo back into the introduction? What can you say in the conclusion that will echo something you said in the intro? What specific call to action would you suggest for the school, and how should the school do this? What could be the impact of this decision, or the legacy of this decision? Meaning, how might this play out over time? And finally, what are any last thoughts you might want the reader to think deeply about this idea of arming teachers? Pause the screencast to answer the questions. Thanks for watching, everybody.